That's right. That's
Name's
right.
Gore.
We got to know him really well here. I want to start actually by talking about this is an Upper West Side movie. This is really this movie. I mean, I think those of us who live here, like, oh, we know that corner. We know exactly where that is. But I also think that that's part of your parents' charm, that they kept it within the community.
Yeah, I mean, they were so genuinely Upper West Side New Yorkers. You know, it just was who they were. You know, obviously from an era. You know, the history of New York, and you know, I don't know. I get nostalgic for it even just thinking about it, but because so much has changed in our world, you know, and that is change is what, you know, life is about. But yeah, they were so genuinely attached to this neighborhood and to that apartment, and it was, you know, just very much it was their home, and I have amazing memories of growing up here. It's home.
When you guys moved out to LA, were you with your parents? Did you want to go back to the Upper West Side? How did you feel?
Well, I mean, we only went out there for a brief period of time. You know, like in the movie, I think things would have been different if those TV series that they had in 1975 had taken off, and they would have spent more time out there. But my mom never got a driver's license, and really disliked LA. But she would come out to stay with my dad when my dad was doing Seinfeld or King of Queens. She would come out, and they became sort of fixtures out of the Chateau Marmont. Similar stories about my dad's bathing attire at the Chateau Marmont pool. It's coast to coast.
I'm starting to think that he didn't actually hit his head. That was what he was into.
I think that was like just sort of like an older Jewish comedian thing. Because I had a meeting once with Rodney Dangerfield, who I knew as a kid. He was in the movie for a second. But I had a meeting with him once about directing a movie from when I was like probably like 30 or something, and it was like at the Beverly Hilton in his suite. And he was in a robe and it was open. So I just think it's kind of par for the course.
Don't go into the men's steam room here at the JCC. I'll tell you that. Let's talk about the movie a little bit. Just first of all, this is your first documentary. How is that different for you in terms of?
Well, you know, I mean, I love documentaries. I have such respect for the form. It's a totally different process, and of course, when you're making a documentary, you don't really necessarily know. I mean, there's all different ways to do it, but you don't know where it's going necessarily. And this one, I had no idea where it was going. You have to be willing to kind of take that leap and live in that uncertainty of not quite knowing what the movie's going to be about. But this one, you know, is so. It's not like I just wanted to make a documentary about something. It was, you know, it's genuinely. It was like trying to make something. When my dad died, that I felt like I had to do something with all this stuff that he had, and it just felt natural to make a film from it because that's what I know how to do. So the fact that it was a documentary was, you know, kind of almost secondary to it, but because I realized that I just had to make something about them. So yeah, but I do love documentaries because I think they're the most emotional experience you can have at the movies because it's real, you know. And it's been strange to do it because it is the first time I've ever done anything where it's like literally, you know, personal stuff that's up there. And that process was kind of a, you know, I think I had years to kind of figure that out, making it. But it's interesting because it's like it's very, you know, private until you release it. The whole time, like I invite people over to my office to look at it as we were making it. We'd have these screenings like once every 4 or 5 weeks to, you know, as the cuts would evolve to get feedback. And it was still like, okay, I'm showing some people who I don't know, friends of friends, and that was interesting to get their perspective. But then it's a whole other experience to then have it out in the world, and I feel really lucky that it's got to, you know, that Apple Films wanted to put it out and put it on their service, because it's just crazy how many people you can reach. And I've been talking with other documentary filmmakers on some of these panels, and that's one of the toughest things is just getting people to see documentaries. And you talk, the work you do with the Disabilities Festival, it's really hard to just get people to. So I feel very fortunate that I was able to just even have a platform for people to see it. But it is weird to have all that personal stuff out there, and of course with my parents not around too.
So let me ask you, why is it important for you to make this movie for yourself, obviously to celebrate your parents, but why is it important for you for other people to see it?
That's a good question, because at first I was just, if I'm being completely honest, I was just making it for my own, need to do something for my parents. And that was the first instinct. And then, of course, when you start making something, then you realize, okay, well, I could just make like a sort of a home movie tribute to my parents and put together their clips and, tell the story of their careers and, through all this archival and stuff. But then ultimately it's like, what then? Okay, then nobody's really probably going to watch that except for people who know them. And,
family.
Yeah. And so then, but I didn't even think about that when I started making the movie, but then as very soon into it, I was like, oh my God, I have to make this something that actually is a movie that has some sort of beginning, middle, and an end. But I didn't want it to be a traditional kind of linear, something that could be, I don't know, like an American Masters or something like that, which would be, focusing on their professional life. Because I didn't think that many people probably would really be drawn to that ultimately too. So it was really working with Jeff Richmond, who's a producing partner on the film, and John Lesher, my producing partner. But Jeff is an amazing editor, and Adam Kernitz, who edited the movie, and Jeff did some editing work on it too. Jeff and I work on Severance together and other stuff as an editor. He's
felt a little Severance.
What's that?
Not at all. I felt a little Severance.
Yeah. But Jeff is, I think, brilliant, and we started to just play around with the kind of the language of the movie. And the idea of, it kind of felt like, I think it mimicked in a way like the experience I was having, which is like that thing when you lose your parents or you start to delve into nostalgia or your past, you open up a box of old photographs, it just takes you into this other place. But then you kind of like get yanked back into the present, and you kind of go back and forth from that. So I felt like that was kind of what developed in the language of the movie, was sort of that feeling of what it's like to kind of, I guess what it was like going through the stuff at the apartment.
It does encourage hoarding a little bit. It'll make a good movie someday. If you keep all your stuff.
It's funny. I never thought of my dad as a hoarder because I don't think he really was. He just like wanted to hang on to stuff, that is what a hoarder.
I noticed the scuba stuff, which must have been from his swimming here at JCC.
Yeah. I mean, that was pre JCC swimming. I mean, like, it's weird. In a way, I'm really glad he hang on to all that stuff. My mom was totally about just like flush it away, get rid of it. But I never looked at it that way. But I think in his mind somewhere he thought there was a value to remembering and to keeping it, for sure.
And how did you go? You had to go through all this material.
I mean, I had help with Jeff and Adam once we started working on it to really, because Dawn Eaton and Jody Eisenstein Miracle, who worked with my parents, who were their assistants, executive assistants, and were with them for many years, were amazing and taking care of all of that stuff. And then my dad was older, the last few years of his life, they spent a lot of time cataloging and going through all this stuff. And it's just like it is in the movie. I didn't realize there was so many recordings, audio recordings. It was pretty amazing to find that stuff.
Amazing, and I mean, it actually makes it into a perfect movie and allows you to have like great access. I mean, they could have been a great American Masters movie, but the fact that you brought in both such personal material and then your own story and your family within it, I think is a great way to do it. Let me ask you about what you learned. What did you learn that you didn't know before?
Well, I mean, I think just hearing some of those recordings of my dad and mom talk, having these discussions, sometimes arguments. I have to say, like, some of the stuff, about my dad confronting my mom about her drinking and those discussions that are in there. That stuff I never was aware of. And I think just from a personal perspective as a kid, you have your perspective as a kid of your parents when you're little, where you don't know all the things that go on behind the scenes or what's really going on with them. And you have your perception of it, and it really opened my eyes to what my dad was going through in the relationship with her. I knew that they had tension in those areas, but I never, and they would fight sometimes, but my dad really kind of kept it all pretty tamped down. And I think it all, like I said, it all came out creatively for him. But he, so I never knew what their personal back and forth was, and so that was fascinating to me to hear. And I think, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if, what else did I learn? Just how much I, value and love my parents, which I know that sounds maybe obvious, but to have the experience of putting the movie together and trying to figure out what the story was and how that connected with my, the discovery during the process of making the movie that I felt like I needed to be a part of the movie to tell my family's story too, in relation to my parents, and the connection that my parents, I guess, or the influence, that our parents have on us is so strong. And what happened to be going on in my personal life at the time that I was making the movie really coincided with that. And that's kind of probably the biggest thing that hit me. It was like, oh wow, I'm like, my parents really did influence me a lot in my life in terms of my life decisions and my relationships and the way that I deal with my kids too. Again, all obvious stuff, but like really hit me on the kind of an emotional level when I was able to kind of see that.
And the family reactions to the film, your kids, your sister?
I was gonna make a joke, but no. No, I mean, Amy, from the beginning was fully on board, and essential to making the movie to us, because I think we share our memories, and we it's really interesting to me, those scenes in the movie where we're looking at footage and kind of having different reactions to it. It's fascinating to me because I feel like in a lot of ways we really did experience so much of that together growing up, and share so many things that only she and I know as brother and sister, which siblings have. But then also to seeing her where she had a different opinion of what was going on, but she has always been completely supportive of it. And the kids and Christine, as I said, as the movie, I was making the movie starting in 2020. Our relationship was evolving. My wife and I, we were separated at the time, so it really was not something that we even were talking about until much later on. And that's really what influenced a lot of the story in the film, was what was going on in terms of the pandemic, and then us coming back together, and my kids growing up. My daughter Ella is interviewed in the movie when she was, I think she was like 18 when we did the interview in the movie, and now she's 23, because that was one of the first interviews we did for the movie. And then my son was 20. I interviewed my son at the very end of the shoot. That interview with him was earlier this year. So he's 20 there, but when we started the movie, he was 15. So they were actually like at different points in their lives, which is interesting, too. And they had different experiences of their grandparents too, and also what was going on with me and Christine. So by the time it came to really, finalizing what the movie was, and as it was coming together, everybody was, the interview with Christine and the interview with Quinn were the last things that we shot at the same time earlier this year, but in a way really tie the movie together, but yet they didn't exist. And a lot of times in movies I find that happens in terms of the process of making something, even writing a movie. I've had that happen where an idea comes in at the very end, that changes everything, but you've been working on it for years and years and years. So by the time, you know, we got to this point in the movie, you know, earlier this year, things had changed in our lives, and for the better, I think, in a great way, that we were able to all talk about this stuff. So I don't think at the beginning of shooting the movie they would have even been in the movie, you know, and it would have been a different movie.
It's a good thing documentaries take time. It's a process that allows you to
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
go through it and change it. I'm going to ask one more question, then we'll take a couple of questions from the audience. This is your cue, people. Were there things that you felt, I can't put this in the movie? This is.
I mean,
and you'll share with this audience.
no, I mean, there's always stuff that, you know, that you have to make a judgment call on, and obviously there's a lot of personal stuff in there, you know, that I really wrestled with whether or not to, you know, what to keep in, what not to put in, especially not having my parents around to check in with them on it. So I had to really, you know, think about it. But ultimately, like, the most important thing for me was to try to, whatever it was included, like, to try to find a balance in the film of that you know, would relay what I felt was who they were and the experience of, from my, obviously it's all from my own, this is all from my perspective, you know, it's a very subjective movie, but from my perspective, to try to relay what I felt their relationship was. And so there could have been more stuff that went one way or the other, you know, that was funny, is really funny stuff, or more, you know, arguing stuff or things like that, that I didn't want to have too much of that, because I think that would have made it, you know, proportionally it wouldn't have been right to what their relationship was, if that makes sense.
It's yeah, and I think that relationship, I mean, that comes through in the film, and I was saying before we started the film, I was talking about how we don't have that anymore. You don't see couples like that anymore, that, you know, perform like that do that kind of comedy, and then their marriage actually withstands it.
Yeah, well, I think also, you know, show business is so different, and what people watch for entertainment, and, you know, what they did was, you know, already in the 80s it was going away. So, you know, they had to adapt to that too. But it's a time in, you know, show business, there's so, I mean, variety shows and, you know, nightclub acts, and, you know, it's all like, a lot of it could be, you know, you could be kitschy and seem like kind of like dated, but it's also like an incredible art form that, you know, that they were doing, that was, you know, I think all of their sketches are so, they're like little, you know, like little plays or something, and they have a lot of emotion underneath them. There's kind of a melancholy about some of them, and they're very emotional. And I just think, yeah, people, the other thing that another thing that I enjoyed making the movie was finding all this archival stuff of these interviews, because I didn't have an interview with them that was like, I'm friends with Fisher Stevens, who's a really great documentary filmmaker, and when I told him I was going to start making this movie, he said, well, do you have like this one interview with your parents, like a core interview that's like an in-depth interview? They do like 60 minutes once or something like that, where you could get all the footage. And I said, they didn't ever do that, and there's no real, like, one real interview that they did. But then we started looking at all this archival of like the talk shows, and like Mike Douglas show, or, you know, David Susskind, or any of those shows, and what people were talking about on television in the 70s. You know, it was just so much more real, and so much more just honest, you know, as opposed to now you go on the Tonight Show or something, you know, you're supposed to go on and just be funny and keep it light and fun. You know, maybe, okay, some political, you know, Colbert, but it gets more political sometimes, but like really, for most actors, you're not ever talking about like what's really going on. And these interviews that were going on back then, even on like the Mike Douglas show, were like, they were talking about real stuff. So that was fascinating to me.
Yeah, and it's amazing how many times they were interviewed together, talking about their relationship, and it's like...
talking for real about their relationship.
Yeah, and really great footage. We have hands up already, and we're going to pass the microphones around, and I guess this enthusiastic person has a...
Your parents were on the Sullivan Show so often. Did they ever come home and talk about what Ed Sullivan was really like?
Ed Sullivan, I didn't get a lot of it. I mean, the bottom line was my mother was scared shitless of Ed Sullivan. She thought he was just really frightening, and my dad loved him. But I think he represented to them. He basically made their careers, and he seemed like he was a really good person to them. But I think it was so daunting for my mom having to go do that show that he represented to her sort of like, the pressure of having to come up with that, sketch every 6 weeks or whatever. Yeah.
There's a question up there.
I loved watching your parents and thinking about they were in the 1970s and your mom had this huge career and your dad really was in many ways very supportive of that career. And I was thinking about them when they were interviewing on the shows. It was in the context of the 70s and the civil rights movement and then the women's movement. People must have been hearing some of that differently. Did they think of themselves as kind of blazing a trail a little bit?
In terms of my mother's kind of doing so.
She was a serious working woman.
Yeah.
And raising a family and talking about the difficulties of what she was doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think she was very, it was that time, I think about like people like Bella Abzug and, and the ERA and all that. And that was very much, at the time. I think, but I don't ever remember my mom. It was always just like, that was just what she did. My mother, she never really was, I think I remember her speaking at some events and being, she was recognized for that, I think, for being, a woman who was really she had a real voice. She was very political. She really, I can't imagine what she would be making or what's going on right now. She would be flipping out. She was flipped out when Trump closed the 72nd Street exit to the West Side Highway. And she said, he's a putz. This was like 15, 20 years ago. Yeah. So it's really, it really is like they were just, but she, they were just doing it, they were doing it, and it was just, that was who they were. Yeah.
There's a question up there.
Hi, the movie's so beautiful, thank you. I have to tell you, this is probably 20 years ago. I went to synagogue in Yom Kippur, and your father was sitting 2 rows in front of me. I don't think I atoned very much that year. I was so starstruck by seeing.
Did he forget to wear his bathing suit?
I'm sure he was forgiven for all of that. I'm just wondering if the experience, and I had a similar experience when my parents died, of going through their stuff in the basement and finding all of these treasures. Has it inspired you to be more of an archivist about your own life and to keep recordings and to keep records so that years from now someone will know what you were about?
Or to destroy everything.
Yeah. Not for that purpose, other than I do that, the archiving. I've been doing that for years of my parents' stuff and also my stuff too, or our family stuff, just to have it. And if you have the ability to do that, I think it's a great thing to do for any family. But I don't have some, like, in my mind, someday my kids will make a movie about me or something, or maybe they will. But in my mind is my dad always, he was always saying, write it down, write it down. He was always writing about his childhood. When he got older, he was constantly writing stories about just memories he had as a kid, and really caring about that, just sort of, but that was just sort of his creative process, I think, in terms of just, he was always kind of digging deep to his past too. So, yeah.
I think we have time for one more question.
A few more.
We got a few more? All right. Security, just hold off.
Hi, question is, did your father ever talk about which show he liked filming more, Seinfeld or King of Queens, and a favorite scene he might have done?
Oh, interesting. I mean, he loved doing both shows. I know that. I think I just saw Julia Louis-Dreyfus in LA recently, and she was talking about there's a clip that's been on the internet of them cracking up at him like trying to remember his line, and like an outtake that goes over and over again. But he says, "You want a piece of me?" to her, and she was telling me how that's like one of her favorite memories of doing that show was that with him. But he just loved working with those people. He had such a deep working relationship and friendship that he had with the people he worked with. My mom loved working too. They just had no real ego about it. And anybody you meet who knew them, I mean, I get it almost daily, is the feedback from people of how much they cared about their fellow actors, and they would go to see play. We grew up with them going to see plays off Broadway or on Broadway, and they always go backstage, always say hi to the actors, and actors are constantly telling me, "Your dad and mom came to see me in this little production or this, or told me to keep going." Like real stories that it's amazing to me. So I don't remember like exactly what his favorite moments were, but I know how much he loved and how much he cared about his work. Doing that show, he would drill his lines, even though sometimes I had trouble remembering that he would drill them over and over again. And it's like doing King of Queens. It was like he was doing Shakespeare. He was, he took it, and which he did too. He did Shakespeare in the Park, and he did theater. I mean, they had an incredible eclectic career. When I think about what they were doing in that period in the 70s and 80s and 90s, where they really did so much theater in New York, real work in the theater, and that is another thing I think that you just like. There aren't people who do all those different things anymore like that, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, in the writing too. I mean, everything.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm really kind of envious of is their amazing relationships and friendships they had with those actors that they worked with from back in the day when they, did like friends they had like Zero Mostel or Rodney or people like that. Their close friends, Barbara and Mark Gordon, who lived on the Upper West Side, and Ann and Eli Wallach and people like that, who they just had these like really deep bonds with these people where they would go out and where they come over to the house, or when they were, I don't know, there's just some connection that like felt like what show business was and being an actor in the theater, or what was that. I don't know, it just doesn't, I don't have that now, or it just doesn't exist in that way anymore. But there was like
Everybody else is doing it.
Okay, just me. But there's just something different, I don't know, about actors in that time, and they were just very connected, and I don't know.
It's true, and I think part of it is, I mean, from what I saw of your father's personality, is part of the like that he was very like he was, and you showed in the movie, he was always excited to speak to a fan. And it was kind of like, it wasn't like, oh, I'm a big star, I'm too good for you. It was always like, he would talk to people. He was a community guy.
Yeah, and that is going back to the Upper West Side. I mean, that was very much, that was just what it was to live here at that time.
Yeah. Let's give other people an opportunity. Who's got one? Down here on this side, sir.
I am a former West Sider, and my children went to Calhoun, and your parents and you used to come into my shop, Baronet Card Shop. You played video games, the ice cream machines.
Wait, on 80, between 80?
Yeah, on Broadway between
81st and
83rd.
82nd and 83rd, yeah.
Near Harry's.
Yeah. It had the upstairs, little upstairs area.
Yes.
I had to play.
You were very good when
play
you
Zach's song there. Space and
You were very good. But when
Loved it.
our lease wasn't renewed, your mom and dad used to come into the store, but your dad, we moved to another location. If you found any mugs or T-shirts when you went through anything, your dad used to come in and shop. And we were in a basement doing T-shirts and mugs, because our children were in Calhoun, and they were wonderful. And it's nice
Thank you.
to see you.
Yeah, thanks. And my kids ended up going to Calhoun too, which is kind of a nice thing. But yeah, but I had good memories there, Baronet. Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
And one up there.
Hi, beautiful film. I was just wondering, as a director, producer, and then a subject in the film, was it difficult to avail yourself emotionally in those moments where you're going through the apartment? It's a part of you. Did you have the director's hat and the producer's hat on?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I learned making the movies, like how much I can suppress emotion. Because, you know, I'm thinking, like, as I'm going around, like, yeah, if I'm filming myself going around the apartment, I should get emotional or something, you know, but, like, it's also like, well, I'm just trying to, it's tough. It was tough for me to get in touch with those feelings of grief and, you know, for whatever reason. Yeah, and, you know, I asked, there's a credit at the end that says, thanks to my friend Mark Romanek for helping me make the movie. Mark's a really great film director I've known for 30 plus years. And I asked him to come when I did the final shoot day, which the final shoot day, besides the interview with Quinn and Christine, was to go shoot Steve Colbert at his place, to shoot that Sullivan Theater, and then also I did the interview where I talked to the camera, where I'm just kind of talking, you know, I'm just sitting talking to the camera, and I knew that I needed a friend to talk to ask me those questions. So that was, you know, really helpful. I asked Mark if he would come and shoot that, and just kind of set it up and ask me the questions and kind of be the guest director for a day, and that really helped me because it was hard to kind of like figure out how to access some of that, and what, you know. It is a strange thing when you don't really have the perspective on it. So I was grateful to him and Jeff and Adam, the editors, to really have that perspective.
One more? Can we do one more?
Yeah.
Right here.
We do too.
So you mentioned when you were a kid that you wouldn't cast your parents in any of your projects because they were too difficult to work with, but then I'm a big fan of Zoolander, and I know that your father was in that, so how did that come to be, and was he difficult to work with?
Ironically, I became too difficult to work with. No, I mean, working with him was the best. And, you know, it's really interesting now having kids, you know, thinking about what that must have been like for him to be working with me. But he, you know, was just, and my mom too, I did like some stuff with my mom too. And yeah, it was, he was just like, you know, he loved the process, and he was great. He totally, you know, he wasn't like, he didn't give me any resistance or anything when I give him direction or something. But it was also like I didn't really have to direct. He's so funny. It was just, he's so funny, you know. Like, and it was so fun to watch him do, you know, the Maury. He just really, you know, kind of was that guy. And yeah, so it was really fun working with him. And I think they appreciated it too. We all kind of like, it was like, oh, this is great. We get to do this together. Did you want to ask?
Yeah. Thank you. Hi, Ben. I sensed a lot of Jewish undertones in the film and in your family, but
Undertones?
it's not something you address super directly in the film. So I'm curious, like, how being Jewish impacted sort of your family life, and it seems like your grief and creating through grief seems to be a very Jewish thing. Like, this crowd, I think, wants to know.
Virtual connection to it in a beautiful way that really like actually made it very accessible to me what it was to be Jewish. So yeah, I mean, it's there, you know what I mean? Like, it's just there, it's part of me. And you know, it is a certain interesting thing in life because, you know, being identified that way, a lot of stuff kind of comes at me and comes through me that way in terms of, you know, being Jewish, and I've had to figure out how to, you know, process that. But it's something that, you know, when I think about it, you know, I connect with. It's just not really on like like on a, you know, religious, you know, sense in that way, but it is it's something that's like kind of part of my nature, who I am. I did have an interesting experience where I got to go to, if you want to tell a Jewish story, I went to Ukraine a couple of years ago, and I had to go through Poland to get back, and we drove from Ukraine across Ukraine to Poland, and we were like 3 hours early from when our plane was going to leave, and I looked at the map and I saw that I was very close to the town where my dad's mother was from, in Poland, called Frampol, which is also where I believe Isaac Bashevis Singer used to write stories about. My dad used to tell me that.
Upper West Sider.
My dad had never gone back there, and my dad obviously passed away. This was a couple of years ago, and so I got a chance to go to that town, this little town. Just drove there, like spur of the moment.
The Upper West Side of the Dead closes down by 10 o'clock. So good night, everyone. Get home safe.